Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diary. I'm your host Rashid, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me for another edition. Hold on one second, everybody. I'm trying to level this out because something is happening here. Okay, so thank you for joining us again on the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, anywhere on God's green earth. I'm your host, your brother, and your friend. And again, thank you for giving me your time because I know time is precious and I know that you could be doing a million other things instead of listening to me or conversing with me or chopping it up with me on the truth of global events, be it economically, culturally, religious-wise, ethnically, racially, sexually, militarily, or whatever. But what we try to do here is build on truth because that is the only foundation that we can put ourselves on towards a prosperous and enlightening future. Okay. I like to give a shout out to my guy though. Pedro was in the building early. Somebody else was in the building early. Let me go back. Let's see. I know Pedro was in the building because he and Solar Bear. Pedro and I was chopping it up in the chat even before we went live. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Pedro. He's across the pond. And he said, hey, listen, it's midnight where I'm at. I'm going to try my best to just stay up and listen as much as I can. But if not, I'm going to be sleeping. It's going to be playing. So shout out to Pedro over there across the pond. Shout out to Solar Bear. Shout out to Ascended Awakening. What's up in the building? Everybody listen. I really, really appreciate you guys joining me. This was an impromptu stream, and it was brought about by a whole lot of things, and I'm going to get into a few of those things right in just a second, but I want to direct your attention to something. In the morning, Central Time, I think it's 10. It could be, I could have the times kind of flipped a little bit, but I believe it's 10 Central Standard Time or 9 Central Standard Time. We'll have my reoccurring friend and guest on the show, former CIA analyst Larry Johnson on the platform, and we'll be doing another edition of the Intel Drop. So please join us on that show. I just had to get that out of the way. And we're still trying to get a confirmation. But we have a confirmation, but we're trying to get a time and a date scheduled for Professor Glenn Deason to join us again, okay, on the platform. So we're working hard behind the scenes. I want to thank each and every one of you who are channel members, who have donated, who shared the video, who spread the word, who hit the like button, who just visits to see and listen. Also, for those of you who are patron members, also, we dropped heat on Patreon a few days ago, and we dropped heat on for the channel members a couple of days ago. Really good videos, and some more will be dropping this week. Now, let's get into this matter. We know that the news is consumed about with the Western terrorist attack in Russia, and we've talked about it on numerous occasions. And what's killing me about this, and I want to get to the Middle East real quick, but I want to just touch on this for a second. What's killing me is that the Western world, specifically and especially the United States, is trying to act as though they had no connection with this. All right. Now, I want to tell you all something. Let's just say, matter of fact, there's something that's out right now in the news across the country. They have a new law now that if your child commits an act of violence with your handgun, whether you have prior warning or not, whether you know about it or not, you will be held responsible, and they will come pick you up and put you in jail and demand that you stand trial, whether you know it or not. Now, if we apply the United States domestic laws to the international arena, whether America knows it or not, whether NATO knows it or not, that the Ukrainian government was involved in a terrorist attack on Russia, they are also involved in it because they fund it, they supply the arms, they give the political cover, they give the real-time intelligence, right? Right? They recruit the people. They have their bases in the military and in the intelligence wings across Ukraine. So they're just as involved as the Ukrainians are. And as I was telling you guys, they constantly say Islamic terror, right? And there was a question that I brought up on, I think it was a channel member stream. Now, and this is no knock to the Christians, but the true Christians. I say true Christians. I'm not talking about this kind of stuff. I'm talking about true Christians. So for those of you who are true, don't worry about what I'm saying. But I'm talking about those masquerading, okay? Now, if you are arming, financing, training, helping, and you are giving political cover, and you've also given these people the ideology that you have, because let us not forget that the Wahhabist ideology is a product of Imperial Britain. People don't want to talk about that. And America has magnified that Wahhabism by 10 to 20 times. So now, if you're responsible for the ideology, you're responsible for the war, for your provocations by putting bases on Russia's borders. Remember that America almost went to nuclear war with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union had a military base that was 90 to 105 miles from the coast of Florida. Remember that? Because it was a national security threat. Yet America has military bases within a mile or two from the Russian border. But that's no security threat. All right? So if you're arming, financing, training, right, and you are the supplier of political cover and ideology, then how in the hell can the puppets be considered extreme Muslim extremists or Islamic fundamentalists or Islamic terrorism? If America proclaims herself to be a Christian nation, which she does, and if Britain proclaims herself to be a Christian nation, which it does, and if the European Union, aka NATO, proclaims themselves to be Christian nations, and they are behind these acts of terror, belligerence, and provocation, then isn't the right term Christian fundamentalism or Christian terrorism? Why is it Islamic terrorism when the puppet masters are pulling the strings? I bring this up and nobody has been able to answer that, but this is what we hear on all of the mainstream and alternative media. It's always Islamic fundamentalists, Islamic terrorists, all of this stuff, Islamic extremism. And yet everybody knows that America arms and trains ISIS, and that is a byproduct of U.S. Mossad and UK intelligence services. So how in the hell can that be Islamic terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism? I just want to know that. Huh? Because nobody has given any sufficient answer to that. But everybody continues to repeat Islamic terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic extremism, and they tie Islam or Muslims to these acts of terror. And when an act of terror goes on in the United States by Johnny, let's just give a name, Johnny Smith, when he goes into a school and he mows down 30, 40 people, it's just Johnny Smith. They disconnect Johnny Smith with his religion, Christianity. And it is not Christian fundamentalism or Christian terrorism or Christian extremism. It's just an act of terror. See the hypocrisy. This is what I'm saying. We have to address these, no matter how uncomfortable these truths are. To get past this, we have to address these elephants that are in the room that everybody seems to ignore, push to the side, or omit, because these are uncomfortable subjects to address. Well, guess what? You got the right one, baby, because I'm going to address them. Okay? So, and everybody's listening, whether you're a Christian, Jew, or Muslim, or what have you, you know what I'm saying is the truth. I'm not demonizing Christianity. What I'm saying is, put this thing up here now and look at it as it truly is. Right? Whenever an act of terror occurs, when America goes over there and bombs Syria and says we have the right to self-defense, that is never termed as Christian terrorism, even though they are illegally in Syrian airspace, illegally on Syrian soil, and illegally occupying Syrian territory against the wishes of the Syrian Arab Republic government and its people. How is that not terrorism? When Iraq votes multiple times each year for the U.S., the UK, and the so-called so-called coalition of the willing to remove their troops and their military, the weapons from Iraq, and they ignore it, and then they go on a bombing spree. How is this not Christian fundamentalism or Christian terrorism when these are the nations who proclaim to be Christians? Why is it just the right to self-defense? You would not even have to worry about that if you were not in their country. These truths nobody likes to hear. Right? And I want you to, as we're talking on this, let's go to Russia for a minute. Go back to Russia for a minute. Now, as I said to you all before this bombing took place, you can go back and check it. Now everybody else is questioning this, but I said this long before this bombing took place when we were dealing with the situation in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Asia. Why is it that ISIS and all of these renditions of ISIS are always attacking the same people that America is attacking? Why are they fighting the same so-called quote-unquote enemy that America is fighting? Why do they seem to say that Russia is their enemy? Has Russia invaded the Muslim lands? Is Russia occupying Syria against the will of the Syrian people? No. What about in Lebanon? No. What about in Jordan? No. What about in occupied Palestine? No. What about Iraq? No. What about Iran? No. So how in the hell can they be the target for ISIS? ISIS is not shooting bullets, not shooting missiles, not bombing U.S., British, or NATO facilities. Huh? And yet you're telling me that these are Islamic terrorists or Islamic fundamentalists who want to set up a caliphate. Make that make sense. That's what I'm asking. Because the average person is looking at this and they're confused, and they're saying, well, a lot of this doesn't make sense. A lot of this doesn't make sense. They don't understand what's behind this, but they're not truly buying the mainstream and some of the alternative media's line on this thing. So to get the truth, you are at the right place. We'll address it all, okay? Inconvenient truths, but truths nonetheless that must be addressed. Now, I want to say something as we because this won't be a long stream today, because we have Larry Johnson on tomorrow, and we're going to have some more guests on in the coming days and weeks, okay? I'm working hard to try to get you guys these things. Remember, it's just me and my son, okay? My son does the computer, the tech, and the graphics, and I do the news, okay? And so I just want you to think about this for a minute. A week ago, Israel bombed Syria. And then the bomb, I believe it was a week ago. It was no more than 2 weeks ago. I can't be wrong. It's no more than 2 weeks, but I believe it was a week ago. Israel bombed Syria on multiple occasions. And in one of the occasions that it was bombing Syria, it had killed an IRGC colonel. Listen to me good. This is very important that you hear this. It had killed an IRGC colonel and some of his entourage, right? Very important. So now we get news that Israel bombed Syria again, and this time it took out a top Iranian general. So let's go to RT real quick and let's read this article. I didn't read it. I told you I saved stuff to read with you online so that we'll be able to go through this stuff together. So listen to what this is. And shout out to everybody. Oh, thank you, V, for joining and becoming a channel member. I got to highlight you. Hold on 1 second. Thank you so much. Let me highlight this before I go further into this. And by the way, we have been disconnected on locals. They keep messing with this show. My girl Holly is in the building. Incognito is in the building. Net Rando is in the building. Thank you all for joining me. So let's go to this article real quick, okay? My guy V, thank you so much for becoming a channel member. Listen to what this says. Israel kills top Iranian general. And when I'm talking to you all, please pay attention to how these sentences are structured, okay? And pay attention to key words in these sentences. we're going to come back to something after I read part of this, okay? So you just bear with me. You know how we do. We have to lay a strong foundation, and then we'll build the house of truth up, okay? So listen. It says, IRGC Brigadier General Mohammed Reza Zahedi was among the dead in a Damascus airstrike. Stop right there. America, France, the UK, and all of the European nations that are part of NATO continues to harp on the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine. Why hasn't any of them said anything about this illegal strike? Why haven't anybody said anything about this act of war, this provocation, and these multiple provocations over the last few weeks? And what is pushing Israel to do that? Is it about her security, or is it about trying to reestablish its dominance over the region? And where are all these weapons, warplanes, and stuff coming from? See, these are things that need to be answered. All right? So we'll go into it. Shout out to everybody over on Odyssey, and those are on Twitter and Rumble. Shout out. Now, let's go a little further in this article. Brigadier General Mohammed Reza Zahedi of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has been killed in an Israeli airstrike on Damascus, Syria. The Monday attack destroyed a building adjacent to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, killing at least 6 people, according to the Syrian Arab news agency. Iranian media identified the building as the Iranian consulate and the ambassador's residence. Iran's Tasnim news agency identified Zahedi, a senior commander in the IRGC's Quds force, as being among the dead. His deputy was reportedly killed as well. According to a Reuters correspondent in Damascus, the consulate was flattened in what was described as a startling, apparent escalation of conflict in the Middle East that would pit Israel against Iran and its allies. Now, it's more of that, but we got to address this, okay? This. So, they bombed the consulate. First of all, this was a direct act of war against Syria for the violation of its airspace, its territorial integrity, and for the attack on its people, its guests, and its infrastructure. By international law and by every means available, this was a direct act of war, okay? Let nobody fool you about this. America is not. What if Syria would have done that to Israel? It would have been all over the Western news of a high provocation and how this was a direct act of war. Now, why is Israel doing that? It's because America is secretly deploying more troops into Palestine and more weapons, warplanes, and some. So that means there's a buildup for something, and they are expecting something, and they want to get the jump on whatever they're expecting. Okay, all right. Holly Horn said, let me see what this thing is like going. She said it was not adjacent to the embassy. It was the embassy. That's what she said. Okay, listen. So I put in the Google search engine. Is attacking a nation's consulate. We're not even talking about the embassy. An act of war. And this one comes up from the diplomacy.state.gov. Okay? An attack on an embassy is considered an attack on the country it represents. Now, down here, it says, what happens if a U.S. consulate is attacked? So now they're putting the U.S. in this position. So now we can see what the U.S. thoughts would be on if this happened to the U.S. Okay? And listen what it starts off by saying, by international law. Okay? All right? By international law. All right? It says, by international law, the host country is responsible for the safety and security of foreign embassies within its borders. If an embassy is attacked, the host country must defend it using military or police force as needed. This is a direct act of war, not only against what? Syria, but against Iran. Now I'm looking at as the Lex says they want Iran to overreact. Now, that is and Pedro says Iran doesn't have a central bank. That's a subject all to itself. But let's go back to something in the chat where Lex says, Sam, shout out to Sam in the chat. I almost missed you. Perseverance Chameleon is back in the building. So Lex says this: they want Iran to overreact. Okay. Now let's look at it. America has had Iran under sanctions, illegal sanctions, for over 40 years. Both the United States, the UK, and Israel have been assassinating nuclear scientists and educated professionals across Iran for that span of time for 40 years. The United States openly asked the second most powerful man in Iran to come to Iraq to have a sit down so that they can iron out a plan to handle ISIS. Soleimani went there, and then the United States assassinated. Let's go from that time of the assassination of Soleimani, all right, which was years ago. Remember, Trump was in office, to right now. Israel, France, the United States, Great Britain, and the covert wing of NATO have been actively sabotaging infrastructure, killing citizens, committing acts of terror, being involved in the trying to overthrow the elections of Iran, using propaganda to demonize Iran, its military, and its electoral process, and right on top of that, they have deemed the IRGC, which is the military, one of the branches of military of the Islamic Republic, as a terrorist organization. When will what is enough? Is enough enough? They just killed somebody else last week. They killed them today. What is an overreaction to this? I'm asking. What is an overreaction? Lex says Soleimani. Yes, Trump did that. He sure did. And nobody talks about that. But and then they try to say this. Well, the deep state did it. And Trump had to jump on it and pretend as he did it because he didn't know what was going on. It doesn't matter. What did George Bush say? The buck stops here, right? That's what Bush says. I'm the commander in chief. The buck stops here, right? Okay. So if it was done under his presidency, then he gets the credit for it. All right? Okay. Now, what is an overreaction when we had just had a history lesson of all of the stuff that has been taking place and all of the things that the West have been doing, not one time, not two times, not dozens of times, but literally over a span of over 40 years to Iran? What would be classified as overreaction if Iran was to respond? Show you this. The United States went into Afghanistan because they say 3,000 people were lost. Well, over the span of 40 years, Iran has lost thousands of people. I'm asking, what's an overreaction? The United States went into Iraq, and it's still there because they're talking about their security. Iran doesn't have that right to respond. Shout out to Flying Crocodile. Iran doesn't have that right to respond. I'm asking, what is considered an overreaction? If you're killing my family, if you're bombing my nation, if your stated open policy is to bankrupt the Islamic Republic of Iran and to have a regime change, what am I to do? Sit there and take it on the chin? Especially as you're building up an illegitimate entity and arming them to do what they're doing. I want to ask everybody who's watching, if Iran were to take these same measures against Israel, Great Britain, France, the United States, or any NATO member, do you think that people would say that Iran wants to overreact? Do you think that the people would say that America shouldn't react, Israel shouldn't react, Britain shouldn't react, France shouldn't react, NATO nations shouldn't react? Why is it do we give the murderers and the warmongers the benefit of the doubt and we put all of the burden on the victims? I'm asking. I'm asking. Because a lot of people don't look at it like that. But that's what it is. Iran is not putting military bases all around the United States, but the United States is doing that to Iran. What are these bases' purpose? What are the purposes for the bases to be all around Iran? It is not to make friends. It is to eventually completely encircle Iran and do what? Make war on Iran. Why? How do I know this? It's because the vice president at the time of the United States says after they invaded Iraq, he said, anybody can go to Baghdad, but real men should go to Tehran. What is Tehran? Tehran is the capital of Iran, the capital of Persia. So they have it in their mind to eventually wage war. Why should I give you the jump? Vladimir Putin said it best. When he was a kid on the streets in Russia, he learned this, that if a fight was about to jump off, then you be the first to sock somebody in the mouth, right? Why must Iran take it on the chin constantly? Why should China take it on the chin? Why should Venezuela? Why should the African states? Why should the Caribbean? Why should Latin America? Why should Eastern Europe? Why should Asian states take it on the chin? Because of America's unquenchable desire for total world domination at all costs. Why? And why is she afforded that luxury? For people to even think about that, think about it. For us to say, well, you know what? Maybe we should step back. Iran has been stepping back for 40 years. 40 years. 40 plus years. Net Rando, that's right. Hit the like button. Hit the like button, everybody. And Holly says, hold on, it ain't going up so fast. Let's see. I'm sorry, Holly. God dang, this thing went up so fast. Holly, I'm trying to find what you just said. I can't find it. This thing went up so fast as soon as I got ready to read Holly's comment. I'm sorry. Holly, I'm sorry. But listen. Why is America and NATO afforded the luxury of the victim? You know what I hear a lot, and I address this constantly, is that when we're talking about the situation that is taking place on the European continent, everybody is outraged that war is taking place on the European continent, right? And they're saying that we need a new European security architecture, right? So why is everybody else excluded from security? And remember, the ones who are destabilizing the world is the United States and those NATO states in Europe. Africa does not have any bases in Europe. Latin America doesn't have any bases in Europe. The Caribbean doesn't have any bases in Europe. Asian nations they don't have any bases in Europe. But when we look at American and the European nations that are in NATO, they have bases in those places. So who is destabilizing who? And why is it afforded to NATO nations to have security when they are the cause of instability and insecurity around the globe? Why does everybody look at it like that? That they should have a new European security architecture when they are the ones that broke the security of Europe in the first place? Hmm? I'm asking you these things. I see Holly says the U.S. has 800 plus bases around. Let me tell you something. I cannot find this. It's on one of my other laptops that went down, right? But I had this. One day I was just scanning and I was watching a congressional hearing. And you know how they have some military people there, and then they have some of the suits and ties there. And as they were addressing a congressional committee, one of the people said that, including the training bases, the stopovers, the regular military bases, that the United States in all had over 5,000. I cannot find that for the life of me. Is that not empire? Huh? Now, let me read something that just came. I wanted to stay on that, but give me a second. And it's kind of warm in here. The air conditioner is off, and like I told you, we're doing some renovations here, so you got to excuse me. That's why it's blurred in the background. We're moving stuff around, and we're getting ready to do other things, so you got to have patience with me. It says overreaction. Reactions is, and then Lex says, and it's Lex Berman, I believe. It says full scale war, full nuclear, send bombs in the world. That's what they want. But Iran is smarter. Well, all right, let's see this. Overreaction is full scale war. Well, the United States have war gamed. Listen to me good. The United States has war gamed this. At least what would that paper say? At least 24 times, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I believe at least 24 times in the last few years. A full-scale war with Iran against the United States. Even if Britain came in, the United States and Britain against Iran, and the United States would lose. This is according to the Pentagon. And they had different levels of you know how they map out, well, if this took place, and they came to the conclusion that not only would America's bases be lost in the Middle East within a matter of a week at the most, but America would lose whole aircraft carrier fleets. You understand? So the cost is high for America too. Now, listen to me good. Everybody should want peace. But when you're trying to have peace and you're dealing with the peace breaker and you're talking to them and you're negotiating with them, and every time you turn around, they backstab you, they do something that unhinges your trust in them, right? Evidently, the language that you're speaking to them, they're not understanding. So when you're speaking to a person and they cannot understand your language, and they refuse to understand the language or learn the language that you're speaking, the best way to get through to them is to learn their language. So there'll be no mistakes, shades of purpose or meaning. So if America's language, and it's evident that her language is that of war, of destabilization, of total domination, then guess what? Iran should speak that language, because in the Middle East and in Central Asia, Iran is the dominant military power. You understand? So should we be afraid of war? Sure. What about nuclear war? Sure. But it is better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. You're telling me that because of fear of war, you will continue to allow somebody to kick you in your behind, slap your wife, rape your daughter? Because in essence, that's what America is doing. So it says, and the world ends, that's what they want. What they want, and here is something that is missed in all of this. America is not the power that she once was. Israel is not. This is why she's doing what she's doing. She's trying to restore some deterrence. She's trying to punk Iran. She's trying to punk Syria. America is doing the same thing. She's trying to punk Iran. But remember that America today is not America 30 or 40 years ago. She does not have the military means or the military capabilities that she once has, even though she's still a fierce juggernaut when it comes to war. But more than the military aspect, she no longer has the political capital, nor does she have the economic wherewithal to prosecute and persecute a war of domination across the Middle Eastern region, because too much is at stake. If Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, America is already in a downward spiral economically. This would collapse the economy of the American empire. You understand? All of this should be put into play. So say no miscalculations. America is calculating that you're going to punk out, that you still believe that she is what she once was. We're getting a glimpse of the new America as we look in Ukraine, as Russia outperforms and thumps not only Ukraine, not only the UK, not only the US, but the entirety of the Western military complex. You understand? This is something that nobody like talks about. Listen. Pedro says, let me see if I can find the clip. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. This is good. Come on. God, these things they're going up too fast. I cannot. I'm just going to read it because I see it over on this one, over on this computer. Pedro says, the U.S. couldn't defeat farmers with rusty AKs. This is what I'm saying. So, in a full-fledged battle with Iran, militarily, it's too much at stake for the empire. Think about this. She's already directing her military towards Asia to try to prevent the full breakout capacity of China. She's already losing on the European continent against Russia, right? So now she's going down into the Caucasus and the Baltics to try to make trouble there, to try to keep Russia preoccupied so that she can then turn her attention to North Africa and the Middle East so that she can pump the nations that she once was able to pump. But this is very expensive in manpower and weaponry and money-wise. And the money that she's using for this is borrowed money. This is unsustainable. This is what I'm telling you. You understand? This is unsustainable. And if a war should openly break out between Iran and Israel, Israel does not have the military wherewithal to beat Iran. Not militarily. And not economically. I want to share something with you all. Some of you may not know this. When we talk about Israel's military capacity and how it is fed military superiority through American weapons, well, we're seeing the reality of American weapons in Ukraine. But more so than anything, do you know how Israel is able to project military power? Do you know how Israel is able to bomb Syria at will and do X, Y, and Z? You know why? It's because the European Union, the UK, and the United States coddle Israel and give her money to keep the economy afloat. They give her weapons. Like, listen, when they say Israel is buying 6 Dolphin-class submarines from Germany, that's a lie. That's the way they frame that so that the German population is not outraged about what is going on. So what they do, they sign a contract for the Dolphin-class submarines. And then what Germany and the United States and Great Britain does is give them a rebate or a coupon to redeem. And it comes off the back of the taxpayers of Germany. The same is with America. Same with the UK. So Israel never really pays for the weapons that they receive from these nations. And then the US, the UK, and Germany and the other nations then feel obliged due to political pressure to give Israel billions in cash to keep the economy afloat. Why? Because Israel is their base in the Middle East so that they can stay the dominant powers over that region because it's oil and gas rich. That's what's going on. Huh? What Incognito say? Pump, pump, good Snoop song. All right, it says, let's see. Random Zergs, man, come on. Random says, maps of Middle East and Africa will change big time in coming 20 years. Maybe Europe too. That's right. You're right. It's coming. Persevere. See, this is what I'm saying. They're not allowing me to highlight my channel members' comments and stuff. This stuff, every time I get to it, it flips off. Come on. Hold on, everybody. Hold on. This has to be StreamYard. This cannot be YouTube. Hold on. Let me see. Come on, man. Every flipping time we get on the air, they're doing this crap. All right, here we go. I'm able to do it now. All right, here we are. It says, Perseverance Chameleon says, a Ukrainian plane was shot down in Iran 4 years ago. What was that really about? You know, when I know, I know. When I don't, I'm not afraid to tell you I don't. And on this matter, I don't. You're not going to get me hyped up, you know, and I'm not talking about you, Perseverance, I'm saying, but most people, they are afraid, especially in the front of crowds, to acknowledge the things that they don't know, right? I think that's a sign of strength, a sign of maturity, when you're able to say, listen, this stuff over here, I know that I don't have the foggiest idea about, you know, and it adds credibility to you when you're able to say that. All right. Incognito has it right. He says, less bases, more doctors. How about this? They're about to pass $1 trillion military bill. $1 trillion. Now, remember on one of my platforms where, who was it? Slipping my, not Larry Johnson. It was one of the people who worked in the Pentagon. I see his face. Mike Maloof. And as he talked, let me see if I still have that up here. Because we'll go into the, if I do, hold on one second. Let me see if Mike Maloof is still up here. I might have erased Mike Maloof's video. It's a very good video on America's war spending and how she hides the true reality of the cost of war. Let's see, please let it be up here. Please don't let me be erased it. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Let me scroll up and see if I can find it. That might be one of the ones I deleted. Well, I think I deleted it. But in there, Mike Maloof was talking about the funny bookkeeping that the Pentagon and the United States use, especially when they're talking about 700 billion and 800 billion when the price is really up in 1.2, 1.4, 1.5 trillion dollars. Do you believe that's sustainable? Now, I want you to think about the seriousness of this. America is roughly at least $666 trillion in debt, according to an economic professor. I forget what college he is, but he's on. I have him on my thing. Matter of fact, where is it at? We'll go back to it if I can find it. Okay, we're gonna play this. Okay, and this is about the how much the debt is at this time when he says it. Okay, it's 2 clips. I had to cut it into 2 pieces. I played this before, but it's imperative that you listen to this. Okay, because they in the chat they raise these questions about the spending. And it's very important that you understand this, because if at the time this professor was talking about the United States spending being $222 trillion, and the time frame that elapsed made it triple to this day right here, okay? If we do the math of when he's talking and we do what's going on today, it's at least $666 trillion, not including the public debt, not including the $35 trillion in debt, right? Not including the $5+ quadrillion in the derivative market. This is absolutely unsustainable if you give the global economy a pass and say, hey, let's just say the global economy is 300 trillion, which none of them are saying that, but we're going to say that even if you gave them the global economy and you multiplied it several times over, it will not be enough to service the United States debt. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in the time of her downfall, economically, there is nobody to come to her aid. And this is the main reason why she's prosecuting and promoting war around the world, because she's trying to hold everybody, stick them up. Keep using the dollar, stick them up. Keep trading your oil and your gas in dollars, stick them up. Let's suppress the price of gold, stick them up. Let's suppress the price of silver, stick them up. Let's suppress the price of commodities, because the lifeline of the empire is the dollar. And if the dollar collapses, so too does American military might and American economic prosperity. Okay, I want you to listen to this. Remember that this took place roughly 10 years ago or 15 years ago, something like this. And this professor, something, I believe it had to happen between 2010 and 2015, if I'm not mistaken, when this came out. I'm not completely sure. I have to go into my computer and look at the date. But listen to him as he's talking about the situation economically with America. And it's two parts. One is 6 minutes, one is 7+ minutes. I'm going to play both parts, but in between both parts, I'll come back and elaborate, and we'll go from there, because you have to understand why America is enraged and why she's doing what she's doing, because she sees that she no longer has any clothes, and the imperial Humpty Dumpty, which is America, is falling off the wall. And when she hits that ground economically, all of the global players will not be able to put the empire back together again, because economically it'll be a mathematical impossibility. I want you to pay close attention to this. All right. And while we're doing this, I'll go over to the chats and on Rumble and on Odyssey and just see if anybody commented. Okay. So listen to this real quick.
Lawrence Kotlikoff, economics professor at Boston University. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's great to be with you, and great to be in Russia.
So you're the one who states that America is broke and is even in a worse state than Greece and Ireland. How so? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, we economists look at all the bills the government has to pay, and in the U.S. case, we have enormous bills that have been kept off the books that are not official debts, but they're very real. For example, paying me my social security benefits, my old age pension, that's a real obligation. It's not part of official government debt, but it's, very important, because there are 78 million baby boomers who are going to get these social security payments, and in addition, medical payments from the government. If you look at all those payments, they're about $3 trillion a year. So we have these huge bills. Nobody has thought about paying for them. And Congress and the presidents over the years have just focused on official debt and basically have not told the public about these big bills.
You said the amount of the fiscal gap in the United States is, in your estimation, $222 trillion. Is this right?
$222 trillion. If you take...
This is like an astonishing number, which is like 3 times the world's GDP. This is more than what the world makes.
20 times higher than the official debt in the hands of the public, which is 11 trillion. So if you add all these spending obligations into the distant future, and you compare them with all the taxes, and you include in the spending all the interest payments and principal payments on the debt, on the official debt, you have 222 trillion in present value. Now this is 12% of GDP on an ongoing basis. In other words, we need to get 12% more of GDP, either in tax increases or spending cuts, in order to have the fiscal gap be zero. We're doing far too little too late. It's like operating on a person with cancer, and you say, well, there's a big tumor here. We're just going to take a little bit out today, and we'll come back in 5 years, and we'll take out some more. But maybe in 5 years, the patient is dead because the tumor got bigger. So this is why we are in worse shape than Greece. And Greece, it's about 10% of GDP. they need on an ongoing basis. We need 12%. Italy, it's about 5%. Germany, it's about 5%. So when you look at it from this perspective, it's a whole different story than when you look just at the official debt. Because these governments are making choices, word choices, about what to call official obligations and what to call unofficial.
So are they intentionally hiding the
They're
enormity
intentionally
of the
hiding
problem?
this. They've been spending, in our country, 6 decades running a massive Ponzi scheme, taking from young people, giving to old people, and then telling the young people, don't worry, you'll get yours when you're old. Promising pensions, promising health care benefits. And, you know, this is happening in all countries. Even Russia has a pension system, but it doesn't seem to be in as bad a shape as ours in terms of paying for its benefits in the future.
But I mean, this number, 222 trillion, I mean, what exactly is this, where is this money going? Who is spending it? I mean, certainly not the average American. What is it, like the 1% of the super rich, the military needs? Where's it going?
Where's all the spending?
Yeah.
Well, you have, again, you've got a lot of old people now. They're getting very high benefits, about $30,000 per person. It's scheduled to go up to about $40,000 when I retire, which will be about 15 years. So you can see that we're just very generous to the old people in our country.
What do you suggest? Like cut spending, raise taxes? That would be suicidal to any American president.
Well, we have to be adults. If we're running the country, we have to act like adults because our main responsibility as adults is to make sure our kids have a good future. So we have to reduce the growth rate of the benefits to the elderly. And that requires cutting the growth, being much more careful about how much we spend on health care, because it's been the health care benefits have been growing at twice the growth rate of per capita GDP for 40 years. These are the government health care benefits for the elderly. So it can't continue because it's going to kill the country. So we have a huge problem. It's being hidden. It's not being described and discussed, disclosed, and we're in very bad shape.
You just mentioned that you need to take care of the future generations. Clash of generations is the term you use to describe what future awaits for American children paying up the debts of their fathers. But the United States, when you look at it, it really has lived on debt ever since World War II, and increasingly so in the past 30 years. And they have somehow managed not to collapse, and they have no problem getting new debt. Why do you think that the new generation won't be able to manage it?
Well, over time, the official debt will become bigger and bigger as a share of GDP. And at some point, the Chinese and other people will stop lending us money. And our interest rates will go up dramatically. We'll have a bond market collapse. And at that point, the deficit will get even bigger. The official debt will accumulate even more rapidly. And our government is also printing a lot of money to pay for these bills. So inflation can also take off very quickly. So I see big problems, and they may not be in 30 years, they may be in 5 years or 2 years, that the Chinese and other people start to understand how bad the situation is. And then we'll be in the situation of Greece, where people won't lend us money.
So that's part one. I see Samuel Hill in the building. Thank you for joining me. I see RCM in the building. Thank you. Flying Crocodile wrote something in the chat. He says, and I don't know why Incognito's comment was deleted. I don't know, but one of you moderators, check it out, please. I don't know why it was deleted. But Flying Crocodile says this: U.S. annual interest bill on their $34 trillion debt is set to increase from $1 trillion to $1.7 trillion within the next 9 months as they refinance. Now, boy, I tell you what, that's a hell of a debt, isn't it? Now, let's go to part two, okay?
How bad the situation is. And then we'll be in the situation of Greece, where people won't lend us money. And then we will have to make big cuts, and everybody will be injured. So
You mentioned China, and I know that China and Japan they top the list of America's lenders. I think
Right.
it's over 1 trillion US debts. Should they just get used to the idea they're not getting their money back? I mean, they can't just come out and say, hey, I want part of the American GDP.
well, if I were anybody, whether I was Chinese or Japanese or Russian, I would not be buying 30-year U.S. government treasury bonds that are yielding 3.5% or something right now, because the prospects for us to print, we have printed so much money since 2007, it's really unbelievable. The Federal Reserve has tripled what's called the base money, the basic money supply. It's called the monetary base. It's actually gone from about $800 billion to about $3 trillion now. And so almost more than tripled. So we have the basis in place for a more than tripling of the price level right now. We have created the foundation for hyperinflation already, and the baby boomers have yet to retire. So right now, 12% of all the federal spending is being financed, paid for by just printing new dollars. That's what's going on. So we're acting very much like a developing country in terms of our actual finances. And I've been concerned about this and writing about it and speaking about it since the late 80s. And other economists have as well, and also some politicians, but it's getting worse. It's not like anybody is actually looking carefully at these numbers. The politicians are looking at the official debt numbers and not really discussing the magnitude of what's coming.
You know, a lot of people who think like you, who are critical of the current American financial system, have come out on the street in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they've voiced their concerns and their protests. Do you
Right.
think a movement like this is actually capable or able to solve real issues, or is it just a red herring?
Well, Occupy Wall Street was concerned about inequality, and they were concerned about what Wall Street was actually doing. And I think we need to radically change our financial system, because we have two big problems, and this is true in every country, including Russia. The traditional banking system, the model is one of very high leverage. Banks borrow a lot of money, promise to repay, and then there's opacity. They take the money and they do something with it, but they don't tell you what they're doing with it. So people get very concerned at some points about whether the banks actually can repay. And then you can have runs on the bank just overnight. So it's a very unstable situation when you promise people things and then you don't show what you're doing with their money. And that's what happened with Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and Merrill Lynch and all these companies that went under one after the other. Everybody started worrying because they couldn't see the assets. So what we need to do is get rid of this faith-based banking. We need to have no leverage, and we have to have transparency. The government has to disclose what the assets are. The government has to do verification and disclosure. We should have the government agency verify that somebody's mortgage is actually a reasonable mortgage, that that person has a job, that person has an income, that person's house, which is collateral to the mortgage, actually has this value. So we should not have any liar loans. And then we should also have all the banks become what are called mutual funds, which just sell shares to these funds. So they're taking all the money on an equity basis. They don't borrow money, they just sell shares of stock. The money comes in, and then they buy these disclosed assets, the mortgages, for example. And then if you have equity-based finance, then if the mortgages don't work out, somebody doesn't repay, the shareholders take a loss, but the financial intermediary, which is a mutual fund, never fails. It never goes bankrupt. So you have a banking system that can never fail if it's made out of equity-financed mutual funds who are buying transparent, fully disclosed assets. That's what we need. And that's what the protesters on Wall Street didn't know what they wanted, but this is really what they need. What they wanted Now, what we need is also protesters among the young about their fiscal treatment. That's a different thing.
That's the thing, the fiscal cliff and the possibility of America defaulting that we hear it a lot around us. Is this a symptomatic agony, or is it maybe artificial political crisis?
I think young people don't fully understand how bad they're being treated. In the debates, in the entire campaign, not one of these two candidates talked about the magnitude of the problem. President Obama said that our Social Security system, our basic government pension system, has a small problem. It needs to be tweaked, is what he said. Well, if you actually look at the system at the trustees' report, the thing is 31% underfinanced. So it's not a small problem. According even to the Social Security actuaries, it's a huge problem. So, he's on a different planet from the reality. Romney felt that we could just lower taxes and get more revenue. So he was equally, crazy on this stuff. And unfortunately, we have children whose futures are at stake here. And they're also under a lot of pressure in other ways, because they're competing with a lot of people all over the world. And they're also competing with these new smart machines that are taking people's jobs away. So in our country, when you go to a grocery store or a drugstore, the checkout person is a machine. There's nobody working there. It's just a machine these days. There's actually maybe one person to help you use the machine. And so that's replaced lots of jobs. So we have young people who are having trouble finding jobs. Even college graduates are having trouble.
Lawrence Kotlikov, thank you very much for a very interesting insight that you gave us on the...
So, first of all, I want to say something before we go further on this. Reef Omar is in the building. I want to say something. Reef, I'm looking, and you're not showing up on YouTube. You're nowhere on the YouTube chat thing, and then I see you over in the on my dashboard. So that's why I didn't call your name. I'm sorry. I've been looking while the screen. I told you they do this stuff live. Reef, you're not on the YouTube chat, but you're in this chat right here, which is part of YouTube, but it's not showing up on the YouTube screen. So my guy Reef Omar, shout out to joining us. And he says this. Reef always brings some good points. The U.S. has to borrow money just to make the interest payments on her debt. Facts. Then it says this, and which is crazy, because he makes a statement right after Samuel Hale, and it doesn't show up. It's Samuel says it's over. And then Reef Omar, he responds, he says, according to Money Watch, U.S. debt payment is set to exceed defense spending. It's much, much worse than we could possibly imagine. I bear witness. And on USRareCoinInvestment.com, this is an article. It says, it is now mathematically impossible to pay off the U.S. national debt. And it says, a lot of people are very upset about the rapidly increasing U.S. national debt these days, and they are demanding a solution. What they don't realize is that there is not a solution under the current U.S. financial system. It is now mathematically impossible for the U.S. government to pay off the U.S. national debt. Now, that in itself should tell you something of how grave the situation is. And also, I see somebody else says something that is not showing up over here. Man, they're tripping. So everybody listen, if I'm not saying your comment, and one of them is not showing it, and then I'm missing it on the other one. So please charge it to my head and not to my heart. I'm not ignoring you. It's just these people are tripping. Incognito says Sophia is cute. He says, I would let her marry my child. Just saying. And he asked me, was that an old clip? Yeah, it's a very old clip from like either somewhere between 2010 and 2015. This is what I was trying to show you. I keep receipts. I keep records. And this was $222 trillion then in America. And now when you see the building up of the debt and how it's now a mathematical impossibility to pay it off, then you get a better understanding of why America is waging these insane wars and trying to prevent other nations from rising. You see it because desperation is sitting in. It's sitting in. And matter of fact, let's go to something real quick. I played this old clip too. I want you to listen to this. This is by F. William Engdahl. He's an American German, I believe, and he lives in Germany. He is the man that coined the phrase full spectrum dominance. That's the man that coined that phrase. Now, before I play this clip, I also want you to know my studio chats, it may say 30 some on y'all, but my studio dashboard says we have 87 people in the chat watching. Please hit the like button. I'm asking you this. Please hit the like button. And I also want you to watch this after the show. Do this for me, everybody that's watching. Go after the show and look at how many YouTube says, how many views YouTube says we have. It'll say 1 or 2 or maybe even 4. I want you to look at this right after we go off the air, okay? So keep that in mind as we're going. So we're going to play this. And listen how dire. Now, mind you, when I played that clip about Calling the Cough, I think that's his name. This video right here is around the same time, okay? And I want you to listen to what he said then and remember that all of the economic barometers have deteriorated to a degree which nobody could even imagine today. The unemployment, the debt burden, the public debt, the private debt, the debt market, blah, 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 all of that. The cultural wars and everything, the more wars that America's fighting around the globe, all of that stuff has metastasized to a degree which you cannot even fathom. And while you have that pondering on your brain, I want you to listen to what Engdahl says and how serious the situation is, okay?
Joining us today is best-selling author and economist William Engdahl. He's been writing on issues of energy, politics and economics for more than 30 years. Thank you for joining us today. Recently, we've seen several American banks beat forecasts and record an increase in profit. So is the worst now over for the world's economy?
This is by no means a sign of the end of the crisis. I estimate that we're perhaps 40% into the losses alone in the U.S. real estate sector. And these banks are, when we talk about the banks, we're talking really about at most 7 or 8 huge institutions that are at the center of this crisis, and not tens of thousands of smaller banks in the U.S.
So in your opinion, do you think it's too soon to be optimistic?
It's absolutely too soon to be optimistic in the U.S. The U.S. is the heart of a global problem, the core of the problem. And U.S. financial and banking deregulation since the end of the 1990s is the proximate cause of the problem. And that is a process now that is going to put the U.S. into what I call 10 years of hell. It's going to be worse in some respects than the Great Depression of the 1930s for most Americans. And everything that the current administration and the previous administration have done about the problem is merely going to make it worse for the actual economy.
So now let's shift to Eastern Europe. Now you've written at great length about the drama that's unfolding there. So could you perhaps paint us a picture about the situation there at the moment and which countries are most affected?
The problem in Eastern Europe is if you will, a derivative problem of the problem of cheap credit coming out of Wall Street over the last 7 years. And as the Fed lowered its interest rates after 2002, partly to create this real estate bubble and to feed the Wall Street banks' securitization process, the interest rates worldwide came down, the European interest rates and so forth. So banks in Europe were able to borrow money very cheaply and lend it out to Eastern European countries that were in the European Union, like Poland or Hungary or the Czech Republic. I don't see it as the same kind of crisis as the derivatives-driven crisis in the U.S. banks, because there is a real housing deficit after 50 years or so of the controlled economy, command economy, under the Warsaw Pact, Soviet Union era, and people do have jobs. This isn't derivative speculation off the books. This is simply normal banking loans. And what the EU governments have done in one form or another is to step in with IMF funds. I'm not a fan of the IMF in any way, but the purpose of the funds was to stabilize the currency so that it doesn't become a speculative target and make the crisis worse. I think for the moment it's quote unquote under control. It doesn't have the leverage potential that the American crisis has.
And Russia is currently in a similar situation, with rumours that many banks will soon go bust if more negotiation doesn't happen with the West sometime soon. So what do you think is the best option available to Russia?
Russia has to, and this is, I think, one thing that the current government and when Vladimir Putin was president, I think he very much tried to do, is to bring the crucial elements of a sovereign nation back under state control. That doesn't say going back to the era of central planning communism, but certainly to control your currency, to control your credit system. These are things that any sovereign nation should rightly have. And in terms of the banking crisis, perhaps there are some banks that would do better if they were nationalized. If the losses are too great, at least nationalized so that they could be then cleaned up from the toxic waste and the bad investments, and that the real economy comes out of this as the healthy factor and not pure financial speculation for the good of a few oligarchs at the expense of the Russian economy and the Russian people.
So how long do you think it's going to take before we see the end of this recession?
The point is, we're at an epochal change. This is something that happens perhaps every 400 or 500 years. This isn't a once-in-a-decade recession that we're living through. And I call it in my new book, which was just released in German, the decline of the American century. This is a terminal decline, as you had with the British Empire after World War I. And it wouldn't matter if Jesus Christ were the President of the United States today. There would be nothing he could do to reverse that decline process. We would almost have to reorganize and start from scratch, because the cancer of this financial system has embedded itself so deeply that they've destroyed industrial technology in the United States. They've outsourced manufacturing over the past 25, 30 years to Asia, to Eastern Europe, all over the world. The American elite has rotted itself from inside out over the past 30, 40 years, since the early 70s. So Europe, including Russia, very much so including Russia, or let's say Eurasia. Eurasia is a vast continent which has every resource man could imagine for anything that we would want to build economically. It has the brain power, it has the scientific talents. We haven't totally destroyed that, as has been the case in the U.S. And that is all we need. It has the raw material. Russia has unlimited technology for unlimited resources of natural gas and oil. The Russian geology is light years ahead of American and Western geology, geophysics, let's say, because it is based on real earth science, real physics, and not on hocus pocus to hide the fact of how much oil the world has. So there is nothing that's lacking. The decision in Western Europe, in the European Union, is for many European elites, I know this from discussions here in Germany in the recent years, they have to make a choice, and they're schizophrenic about that choice right now. Either strengthen the Atlantic alliance with Washington and go down with the sinking Titanic called the American century, or carefully try to reorient the supertanker called the European Union and build bridges of cooperation with Russia above all, with China above all for economic markets and whatnot.
And what are your thoughts on the US President Barack Obama? Do you think he is the man to control this situation?
No. To my mind, and I said this in print a year before Barack Obama became president, The American power establishment, since the time at least of Abraham Lincoln, with the possible exception of John Kennedy, has never allowed any candidate to get near the White House who they don't totally control. And that we see that in the case of President Obama. So there is nothing that the Obama administration is doing to rock the boat. He is merely, if you will, a cosmetic change. What do you say? Old wine in new bottles, and that's Barack Obama. He's simply an attempt to deceive, to put the rest of the world off balance. But I think it's certainly wearing thin in the American public. They realize he hasn't done anything fundamental to improve their situation, and he has perhaps another 2 or 3 months before he becomes, like George Bush, the most hated man in America, I think.
You touched upon George Bush there. Now, one of your books that you wrote about looks at the hidden history of oil and money and how that is the hidden cause.
So that was part one of 2 parts, but I'm not going to play the second part. But there's some things that he said that we must address. But before we do that, I was telling y'all that it was like 80-some people. Now it's 100 people in the chat. But this is what Flying Crocodile says. YouTube is telling him that there's only 22 people watching. I'm looking at the dashboard right here, and it's telling me that there are 100 people watching. Now, this is what I'm saying. This is what they do to this channel. I continue to tell you this. And then Incognito says, and 4 of the 22 are working for a 3-letter organization, if you know what he means. Oh, and Samuel Hale says, Russia has the most efficient banking system in the world and is natural resource wealthy. Once again, in the words of our brother Dick Gregory, it's over. Now, I want to say something. He mentioned about Eurasia and how it has all of the things that the world would need to survive, and how Eurasia could sit at the center of everything. Where's America pushing these wars at right now? Huh? Eurasia, right? Is that not right? She's trying to dominate Eurasia because the 2 main components of Eurasia is China and Russia. She's waging a war on Russia. She's trying to wage one on China. And guess who's the little man that is in West Asia that she has her eyes on? Iran. Iran is a Western Asian nation, right? This is no coincidence. She's trying to stick the world up. This is strong arm robbery is what she's doing. And most people don't realize it. But he said a few things, okay? And I wrote them down. And as he was speaking, I said, you know what? Let me bring this to the attention of the viewers. So, first of all, we're going to go to this word. He said, America is at the core of the problems of the global economy in the world. This is what he said. So, we put in the meaning of the core of the problem. And the definition comes up. The core of something such as a problem or an issue is the part of it that has to be understood or accepted before the whole thing can be understood or dealt with, right? So when these people omit the stuff that we're talking about, there is no way that we can go on to something better unless we acknowledge the cancer that is eating away at the entire system. Because if you don't address the cancer eats away at the host's body and leaves it lifeless, right? Right? So he also said, America stands at the heart of the problem, and she says she's the cancer. We've already addressed core and cancer. And according to Google, and according to the definition, it says the phrase, the heart of this problem, is perfectly correct and usable when written in English. You can use it to refer to the core, central, or essential part of an issue or problem. So no matter where we look, no matter where we turn globally, America is the core of the financial fallout, the core of the instability of the world, the core of war, the core of the dissatisfaction and the destabilization that is globally, and the core of military conflicts around the world. She sits central to this, meaning that she is a cancer to peace and stability. She's a cancer to economic prosperity and growth, according to definitions. Not according to me, but according to the definitions given. Okay? So, and Mr. Ingdahl says that I term this apocal. Apocal. This is a once in a lifetime thing, he says. Apocal is part of the word apocalypse. We're going to explore both of those meanings, okay? Apocalyptic means catastrophic, momentous, okay? So we have that understanding that is biblical, and it stands for catastrophic and momentous, all right? And so, according to the definition from vocabulary.com, the word apocalypse is a word that means the end of the world. What world? The world that is dominated by the United States and the West, the rules-based international order. So this is apocal for them. It is an apocalypse for them because their world, their way of governance, their way of life, their way of dominion over everybody else is coming to an end. That's why, and I'm not getting religious, in the Bible, it talks about that those 4 horses. And on one of the horses, what? Was war and pestilence, right? That's America. Everywhere she goes, she leaves war, disease, destruction, pestilence, dissatisfaction, and disillusionment. So we're looking at this in real time, that when America talks about China being aggressive and challenging the rules-based order, Russia challenging the rules-based order, Iran, Venezuela, the Sahel challenging the rules-based order, what they're telling you is that these nations are challenging Western dominion in a time that we are living in what he termed as the apocalypse. You understand? So we're looking at the fall of America. We're looking at the fall of the Western world. In real time. I didn't say any of these things. Mr. Ingdahl said them, and he said them when Obama was in office. Okay? So if you have a problem with that, go call Mr. Ingdahl. Email Mr. Ingdahl. Talk to Mr. Ingdahl. All I'm doing is giving you the meaning of the words that Mr. Ingdahl spoke. Yeah. So please hit the like button. Remember to join us on the show tomorrow morning at, I think, 10 a.m. Central Time or 9 a.m. Central Time. I'm not sure. Go check it out on our page. Share and like this thing, okay? Please. Because that's the only way that we can beat the algorithm. And if you have not subscribed, it will not hurt you to hit the subscription button and the bell notification icon. Do that. Let us all play a part in enlightening everybody with the truth of the time. On that note, I go out the same way that I always come in, with love in my heart for each and every one of you. If you love truth, but know that the love that I have for you will pale in comparison to the love that my God, the true and living God, has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, look at your baby boy. I love you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out of here. Peace.